A little while ago, I did a video on 30 plus quality of life improvements for the new FF14 players you guys loved, so I decided to go ahead and make you another one with more cool tips. If you're new to the game, or you just haven't been making yourself at home with the UI tweaks, secrets, and in-game improvements, this is a good one to watch. If you happen to not watch my first video on quality of life tips, you'll find it in a pinned comment description or the info card. My name is Ivona from momsden.com, and if we haven't met yet, subbing now is a good idea. I make simple guides for classes, dungeons, raids, and collectibles you'll enjoy if you're a fan of easy in-game wins. I currently cover all things Final Fantasy XIV, and I also live stream on this channel quite a bit. If you're looking for a wonderful MMO community, drop by the chat and say hi to us. Let's talk about everything in the configuration settings first. I'll start off with what's been most useful to me lately, and that's switching to legacy type movement settings in the character configuration, then control settings, and in the general tab. This enables you to actually run towards the back instead of backwards movement, which is better for the combat environment. However, you're giving up on looking at your character from different angles while moving, as clicking your mouse and turning it will actually change the direction of your movement. It takes a bit to get used to it, but I can see myself really loving this when I reset my muscle memory, and you might love it too. Tab targeting has not been the absolute best in Final Fantasy XIV, but if that's what you use, there's a tweak that can help you with targeting the closest enemy, at least somewhat. In the character configuration, control settings, and then the target tab, you can choose between ignore depth and cone targeting. Cone will target the enemies closest to the tip of the cone, starting with you, moving on to the wider angle. However, you have some dead corners, as there are enemies on the very bottom left and very bottom right of your camera, and those won't be targeted in this way. Ignore depth pretty much ignores the distance between your target and yourself and is less reliable for controlled targeting, but there are no dead angles if you're not directly facing your enemy. You can also enable selecting the target nearest to your mouse cursor and filter who gets targeted, but I personally don't use this option, so I couldn't tell you how good it is. As a tank, I've been okay with cone targeting, as I'm usually not in a position where my enemy is in a dead corner, but next to me instead. If you're overwhelmed by other people's spell effects, and I don't see how you wouldn't be, you can turn those down in the character configuration, control settings, and then the character tab. I keep my effects on full and limit all the other ones, which is sometimes still noisy, but you can tone them down even more and choose to only see your stuff in a limited fashion if you so choose. In the character configuration, control settings, and then the general tab, you also have the option to tweak whether or not you're looking at the target when selecting it, which means your camera won't shift towards them when you click. Some people like this, but for me the constant recentering was making me a bit nauseous, so I turned it off, and now when I click on something, nothing is moving regardless of where I'm facing, and you might like that too. If you'd like to skip the cutscenes you've already seen, for example the dungeon intros, and instead focusing on writing hearty hellos to your party, you can do that in the character configuration, control settings, and then the cutscene skipping for transportation, scenarios, as well as housing cutscenes. If you happen to be tired of casting and action error notifications and their slightly annoying sound, you can get rid of them in character configuration, log window settings, and then the general tab. I unchecked displaying error messages for both failed actions and recast timers. If you're a streamer, this is highly recommended to do, as your audience will have a much better experience with those things turned off, trust me. In those same log window settings of the character configuration, you can also go to notification sounds and check the announcements you want to hear, as well as choose the type of sound attached to it. This is good to do for your party and alliance chats and your DMs, as those can sometimes get overlooked and cause shattered hearts, so make sure you know when someone's desperately trying to reach you. In the character configuration, the UI settings menu, and then the HUD tab, you can scroll down to the bottom and check display target's remaining HP percentage on the HP bar. This helps a lot, as some stages of fights happen in certain percentages of the boss's health, and it's a much more precise way of knowing what's happening in combat in general. If you're bothered by the amount of people's names and their minions that you see on screens, you can make them go away in the character configuration, the display name settings, and then the Others tab. If you prefer walking around the world with a more real feel to it rather than seeing all the people's nameplates, I suggest selecting displaying names during battle instead of always seeing them. In your character configuration, the item settings, you get to uncheck the option called Store All Newly Obtained Items in the Armory chest, and please do that. Your armory chest is for the gear you need only, and not for all the silly glamours and dungeon trash you're looting, so make sure you only put viable stuff there, as there's not a lot of space for it. Alright, let's talk about the HUD layout. What I think you might want to do is move your enemy list to a super convenient place. Mine is somewhere in the middle of this right side of the screen, and I like it a lot better than the default positioning, but it all comes down to what you prefer. What's really important is being able to separate the certain elements, like all the info about the boss you're fighting, as you get to choose where you put all the health bars, the cast bar, and the buff information separately, and the way you prefer. You can also tweak the separate element sizes and transparency, which is also really nice. Once you've separated them, moving the enemy cast bar is, I'd say, almost a must. You can make it bigger and put it in a place where you'll see what's being cast and quickly interrupt the spell if you can. If you're struggling with tracking your own cooldowns and buffs, and you don't want to keep looking at the party list to find them, make sure to enlarge them and put them somewhere you'll keep an eye on them. Mine are in the middle of the screen, just under my health bar, that I placed right where my character's knees are, and I usually don't miss this info anymore. Now I'm going to teach you some chat tricks. First of all, you can make your chat box seemingly go away by right-clicking the chat tabs and selecting the hide log window, and you can always bring it back when you press enter. If you press the gear button on your chat, go to General tab and scroll down to log filters. You can select which messages you want to and don't want to see in all your chat windows, which is useful as there's tons of stuff you get informed about, like who crafted what while standing next to you, that you don't need to know. Yet you do until you get rid of these announcements. In this same General tab that you can also access through character configuration and then log window settings, by the way, you'll find the log text colors option too. If you come from another MMO where the colors of your announcements were different, you might find it easier to switch that color scheme, and here's where you get to tweak all that. If you want to access your chat during a cutscene, all you have to do is press enter and you'll be able to say hi to your party while watching a movie. It took me a long time to figure this one out, so hopefully it helps you before getting to Heaven's Fort like it did for me. If you know you have an item but don't exactly know where, you can perform an exact or partial search for it by typing /iSearch or /item search in chat, followed by the name of what you're looking for. You'll be presented with results of the search through your whole inventory, and you will be able to locate where you stashed something long forgotten about. There's a useful setting in your keybinds, the chat tab. By default, the reply temporarily back is set to Alt-Shift-R, and pressing those buttons at the same time will allow you to easily reply to a DM you received, but you can bind it to something less complicated if you so choose. You can shuffle through your postures in chat by typing /C-pose and choosing the one that's best looking for your character in your chosen glamour, which I thought was pretty cool and discovered it way too late. Let's talk about vendors and the market board prices. If you wish to buy an item, let's say from the market board, you need to check whether or not it has the shop selling price on it. If it does, it means there's a vendor somewhere that sells it, probably for way less gil than in the market board. So if you don't want to get scammed, check this thing first before you give someone thousands of gil on something that's only worth a couple from a secluded vendor nearby. When it comes to buying a house, do not buy it from anyone, as that's usually a scam. You can't instantly get a plot someone relinquishes, as there's a hidden timer for when you can buy it again, and other people will compete for that same plot. And if those people are claiming to make you a free company master of an FC that has a house and they ask you to give them a bunch of gil, it's best to not fall for that, as that's usually not something that ends well for you, especially if you don't know the person you're talking to, so beware. If you're trying to get Gisal greens to summon your Chocobo, don't buy these off the market board, as that's a ripoff. Lots of vendors sell them. You just need to look it up and choose the closest one and buy these for an actual fair price. When you're trying to sell something on a market board through your retainer, click on the tiny button for comparing prices, as the default suggestion is usually very wrong, and you can lose a fortune if you just post everything for the price the game is suggesting. Now let's talk about duties. When queuing for a duty finder, you can select up to 5 dungeons to queue and not just the default one, but make sure you uncheck them when you no longer want to go there, as this is often forgotten and can have you spend 20 minutes in a place you don't need to be in because leaving your group for your own mistake is just bad manners. Also, when you're queuing, make sure you visit the little cogwheel settings at the top left. They're not in an intuitive place at all, in my opinion. You can tweak a lot of your group settings there, and checking the join party in progress can sometimes get you straight into a dungeon where you'll spend less time while still completing it. By selecting undersized party, you can queue for a place alone, assuming you can clear it, but then avoid having the level sync option on as you'll get destroyed. When there's a glowing aura around the enemy's cast bar, and the aura is red, that means you can and should interrupt that spell. When it's unimpressive and just orange, there's nothing you can do about it directly, so keep that in mind. You know those tiny little numbers on your party's job icons? Those are telling you who's pulling the most aggro or enmity, and that can help you know who's about to cross the line if you're a tank and you're getting minions ripped from your grasp. Or if you're a healer whose tank is dying and you're trying to predict who's next that's about to get hit in the head. Let's talk about your inventory. If you right-click on any of the items in any of your storages and select Sort, the game will reorganize your inventory, which could be something you either love or hate, so be your own boss when it comes to this. Now, something that's probably in your inventory if you're a fellow Sprout are the Vesper Bait tickets. Use them all the time to teleport, as you won't need them later on in the game. Every time you hear Manphilia and she says something along the lines of "Pray return to the walking sands," use the tickets as it will save you quite a bit of guild time and trouble. Did you know that when you're turning in key items for your quests, you don't need to search your bags for them? All you have to do is right-click on the image in your quest turn-in option and they're magically spawn there with no trouble at all. I wish I knew that for the first 50 levels of the game. When it comes to daily, useful, but optional things to do, learning about retainers and leveling them ASAP is what you should be doing. They can bring you a bunch of useful and expensive things and have so much room for all your nonsense that they're keeping stashed, and that's how you can access the market board and sell there too. Another optional feature, but also very useful, is squadrons, which will unlock by leveling your Grand Company ranks. These are also daily missions of a sort, but there are a lot more, and if you don't have a squadron team yet, you really need one. I won't go into detail with them in this guide, so if you care about the daily missions, command table type of stuff, easy leveling, and cool rewards, as well as not being capped on your company's seals ever, do get yourself a squadron team. Alright, let's talk about cool things in your UI to bind, click on, and look at. If you go to your Actions and Traits menu and into General, there's a button called Materia Extraction that you should take out and bind in your hotbars. This will allow you to extract materia from all your gear everywhere, and you want to be checking this from time to time, as extracting and selling materia on the market board is free gil and there's no reason not to do this. If you hold Control and the up or down arrow, you get to permanently adjust your camera height to better suit your character, which is cool if you're a tiny Lala or freakishly tall like me, or if you just like to customize everything. If you open up your map, hold Control and right-click somewhere on the map, you can place a map marker for you and your party to see. If you happen to place the marker on a teleport and want to use that teleport, holding Control while trying to click onto the teleport will allow you to click on the teleport by placing the marker kind of on a layer underneath it. In the keybinds and then targeting, there's an option called Target Nearest NPC or Object, allowing you to target an NPC even through a bunch of other players around it, which comes in very handy when there's a crowd. The default button for interacting with that NPC without clicking on it should be 0 on your numpad, which is pretty much the keybind for confirm in your system keybinds. So you can just press numpad 0 and start talking to the NPC without having to click anywhere. I bet you didn't know that. If you're a bit of a tryhard and want to always have an optimal rotation, you can look up your spells ahead of time and bind all the buttons you'll ever need onto your hotbar so that you can get used to the way they look and simply start using the spell when it becomes available. If you happen to right-click on the money icon where your guild is shown on screen, you'll actually shuffle through all your other currencies too, without having to search for them in your currency menu unless it's something obscure and oddly specific that you're collecting. Did you know that you can summon your chocobo for a whole hour rather than 30 minutes by using 2 Gestalt greens at once instead of 1. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but I usually forget to refresh the chocobo before it despawns, so this is handy if you're a goldfish like me. When it comes to your food buff, you can also increase it to 60 minutes if you eat 2 pieces of food instead of 1. You can further increase your food buff with free company actions if you know you'll be doing a lot of dungeoning and leveling that day, so make sure to take advantage of that. There are some uncategorized things I'd like to bring up that you may find useful. When you're interacting with a striking dummy, you can reset the enmity or aggro by right-clicking on the dummy's health bar and selecting the Reset Enmity option instead of running away from it. If you feel like revisiting your past memories once more, you can go to the journal in your city-state inn and rewatch all the cutscenes from all the quests you've done so far. However, you will look like you from the present and not the way you looked before, so keep that in mind. And that is pretty much all I could think of for now. Let me know in the comments if you have any useful tips for others, or if you have any questions, ask away and I'll get back to you. Massive thanks to everyone supporting the channel, as they're the reason why I get to do this as a full-time job. If you'd like to join them and keep the content going, you can do it here as a member or over on Patreon. Have fun, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye!